President Trump says he's imposing an additional 10% tariff on Canada in the wake of a row over a television ad. The US halted trade talks with Canada in response to the advertisement, which was funded by the Canadian province of Ontario. For more, we're joined now by Professor of Economics and Public Policy at the University of Michigan, Justin Wolfers. Hi there, Justin. Thanks so much for joining us today. So initially, Donald Trump halted all trade talks over this ad going to air, but he's now lumped Canada with that additional 10% tariff. Can you just explain to us how a baseball game poured fuel on this fire?
Wow, you want to add all the elements of stupid and make this feel even dumber than it ever was. So let me actually start with what happened, which is the province of Ontario aired an ad featuring Ronald Reagan. Reagan was very, very staunchly against tariffs. He was a vehement free trader and a believer in freedom. And what's so interesting is to see how far the Republican Party has come since the days of Reagan. They just showed that ad. That's all they did. They showed it during the World Series. The World Series, of course, was between Ontario and the LA Dodgers. Trump got very upset to discover that the Republican political hero hates his signature policy. The Reagan Foundation appears to have been taken over by Trumpists, and rather than defend President Reagan's legacy, they said that these statements were taken out of context, which is absolutely untrue. Reagan was on the record 1 million times being a pro-trade guy.
So this has sort of, I guess, been a bit of a build-up to this point of adding the additional tariffs. So the ad has now been taken off the air, but as you mentioned, it played during the World Series, and that sort of, is that what sort of triggered this additional tariff?
Yeah, well, look, first of all, it's a World Series between a Canadian team and an American team, and no other countries are invited. Let's just forget that. The President Trump appears to genuinely believe that this ad was somehow doctored. He's gone out on his Truth Social network stating that this was generated by AI. It wasn't. That this was a misrepresentation. It wasn't. And he's angry that Canada is, and it was actually the province of Ontario did this. He's angry at Canada. So he said initially he would cut off further trade talks with Canada, which is problematic enough. Then he decided to whack the American people with a further 10% tax on goods imported from Canada, which is, of course, what a tariff is. Interestingly, it's quite clear the president doesn't have the legal authority to do this. The Supreme Court has yet to smack him down on this, but the powers he would be using are the Emergency Powers Act. The Emergency Powers Act both says nothing about tariffs and requires a national emergency, and the president having his feelings hurt is by no means a national emergency.
Yes, the Supreme Court is still looking at some of those issues, as you mentioned. So what does this mean for the tariffs that have already been imposed on Canada? Where does it leave these discussions now?
Right. So actually, it's important to realise that Canada actually has quite low tariffs. At the latest juncture, Trump did two things. He said any goods that were compliant with the existing Canadian-US free trade agreement would be treated as if covered by the existing agreement. Initially, that was about 3/4 of it, all Canadian goods. The reason it wasn't all of them is just when tariffs were so low, no one bothered getting certified. Once the tariffs went up, everyone's certified. Now about 90% of Canadian goods are covered by this. So most Canadian goods are coming across the border with no tariff. About 10% of them are, and it's that 10% of the goods that the president has been going on and on about. His new 10% tariff today, it's unclear whether that applies to all goods or only this outstanding 10%.
And we haven't officially heard from Mark Carney yet, I don't think, but both leaders are expected to be at ASEAN. Will there be any room for negotiation between these two leaders, do you think?
Mate, of course there is. At this point, though, the thing to understand is you and I could try and talk about this like it were economics or like it were international relations, but it's not. It's a soap opera. It's sons and daughters. It's home and away. its neighbours. And it's going to be a soap opera that goes on and on for the next 3.5 years. And just like sometimes, Madge would get a little cranky at neighbours, we're seeing the same thing happen here. Not a lot of rhyme or reason. What we see, though, is the spotlight is relentlessly around the president. It also means that the thing that he claims to want is deals, deals, deals. Look, you can't do a deal with a bloke who halfway through the deal all of a sudden decides he'll throw on new tariffs on steel and aluminium, or that he doesn't like something that one of the provinces has done, or that he doesn't understand the history of his own party and so will tax Americans as a result. It just means the single best strategy is, in fact, the one that Australia has been following: stay out of the way. For all the people who are saying you've got to get more meetings with the president, the single best thing to do is make sure he forgets the name of our country.